Hello, welcome to More Yoga with me, Emily. Thank you so much for coming here today and for giving yourself this time to move and to breathe and to do yoga and to settle the brain a little bit. I thought what we would work on today is extension at the hip. Now, often when we go into extension at the hip, we start to crank into the low back, right? So, because it's easier. You get a lot more mobility that way, right? Imagine if you're on hands and knees and you're lifting a leg behind you. If you dip the belly to the floor, then the leg can get way up into the sky. But it's not very great for developing strength that way, right? It's really good for hyperextending your back, your lumbar spine, but not great for developing strength at extension in the hip. So that's what we're going to work on a little bit. If that doesn't mean anything to you, don't worry about it. We'll just do yoga and it'll be good. All right. Okay. So for today, it would be really useful if you have something to lift your hips up off the floor, like if you're on your belly. So some sort of padding or cushion or pillow. If you are not comfortable being on your belly on the floor, I will give you other options today, although it will feel a little bit repetitive because your options will be ones that we're going to be doing also. So this might not be the class for you. Or parts of it might be a really great class for you. Either way, let's start lying down on our backs. Even though we will eventually make our way prone, let's start supine. Just a, couple little fitness terms for you there, anatomical positions. And depending on how your day has been so far, you might need to get some wiggles out or knock some books over, take some time to settle onto the earth. Maybe you feel ready to be still already, in which case, fantastic. You could have your legs stretched, you could have your knees bent. I'm going to do that. It actually feels better for me today. And if, like me, you have your knees bent, take your feet a little bit wider than your hips, even mat width apart, and allow your knees to hang in toward each other. And this just takes all of the muscular activation out of having to be here, right? So you can be here at ease. A little loop of your shoulder blades onto your back, just so the heart, the chest can open. And then for 3 breaths, excuse me, inhale through your nose. And exhale, sigh your breath away. Get a couple more, just like that. And continue breathing however you need to. Could be in and out through your nose or your mouth. And allow your day to melt away from you. So don't worry about what happened before you got to this moment today. Don't worry about what you have to do when you're done. Can you simply be here now? Last few breaths here. And when you're ready, start to bring a little bit of movement back to your body. Whatever way feels best for you to wake up, little wiggle of the fingertips or toes, or a little rock of your head from side to side, or even a full body morning stretch. Until you feel ready to draw your knees into your chest and take a little rock from side to side. So here, massaging out the base of the spine and the pelvis, maybe a little bit further up into mid-back, and then start to draw circles here with your legs and the hip sockets. Now that your knees could go in the same direction as each other, that has the sort of benefit of feeling like the side to side rocking or in opposite directions from each other, which is going to give you a bigger range of movement at the hip socket. Whatever you need today, maybe you do a little bit of both. And do make sure that you take your legs in both directions. And then pause in center from here, keeping your knees bent. Bring your feet to the floor, about hip width apart, parallel-ish, close enough into your bum that you can tickle your heels with your fingertips. And then, test it out. Because sometimes I don't set it up properly and I need to adjust. Doesn't matter how many bridges I've done in my life, I still make sure that I've set it up the best way for my body. Okay, little loop of your shoulder blades onto your back. Arms could be extended by your side, or you might bend your elbows. And then really thinking about pressing your heels into the floor. Inhale, lift your pelvis and spine up and away. Now I want you to really concentrate on squeezing the bum here today as we lift up. And then exhale, slowly lower back down. So a few more of these. Inhale to lift and exhale to lower. And as you lift up, you can play with thinking of tucking your tailbone up to the sky and see how that feels, or letting it kind of droop towards the earth a little bit. For me, drooping towards the earth starts to get into hyperextension of the lumbar spine, which doesn't feel good. So I like imagining my tailbone either parallel with my legs or even getting squeezed up to the sky a little bit. Now, you can't move your bones, but you can use the muscles that are attached to the bones, right, to change the position. So, last couple here. Basically, all I want you to do is just really squeeze your butt when you lift up. And then next time you're down, pause there. Heel and toe your feet out wider, maybe mat width apart, and take a few windshield wipers of your knees. And the next time your knees are over at the left, pause there. This might be enough for you today. Kind of a nice passive stretch. You could reach your right arm back into the right. If you'd like to deepen it, and what do you mean by deepen it, Emily? Well, getting more into the top of that right hip, you could cross the left ankle over top of the right thigh. And then maybe you just let it hang passively, or maybe it feels better on your body to squeeze the bum and lift the hip up to the sky a little bit. So a little bit of hip extension, right? By squeezing the bum on the right side, we're opening through the front of that hip. And if your ankle is crossed over top, unhook it, and then take a couple windshield wipers to release. And the next time your knees are over at the right, pause there. Again, this might be enough. You could reach your left arm back into the left. Or maybe you feel like trying to deepen it, in which case hook the right ankle over top of the left thigh. Again, that might be where you stay. Or maybe you squeeze the bum on the left side to lift the hip up. It all depends on where you're tight in your body, whether it feels good to do this in a passive way or an active way. Right, what's right for me certainly might not be right for you, and that's totally fine. Certainly might. You know what I mean. Okay, unhook the ankle if it's hooked. Inhale, come back to center, little windshield wiper. And then draw your legs toward you again. From here, you might grab the backs of your thighs and start to rock and roll up and down your spine. You could play with it if that feels good. If it doesn't, roll to one side, use your hands, press yourself up. Excuse me, and we'll meet on hands and knees. So eventually setting up here with your knees underneath your hips, toes can be tucked or untucked behind you, and hands outer shoulder width apart or wider. So when you look down, you want the outer edge of your shoulder to line up with your middle or the middle of your wrist. Fingers spread wide. And let's start to move through cat and cow. So inhale, lift the tailbone, hollow through your lower back, broaden through your collarbones. Exhale, tuck your tailbone under, round through the spine. Press the floor away from you with your hands. And then inhale to dip the belly into cow. Exhale, round into cat. So a few more of these on your own time, on your own breath. And even here, cat and cow can be, kind of passive and stretchy or soft, or it can be really active. Like if you're in cow, you can really think of lifting the tailbone up to the sky a little bit more, pulling your hands toward you, really getting an active release through the abdominals. When you're in cat, you can think of really trying to give me your best Halloween cat, reaching every single vertebra up to the sky. Or maybe it feels better to just move softly, right? So move how you need to move. You could bring some natural movement in here. Wag your tail from side to side, barrel rolls through the chest or shoulders, right? Just loosening up your body. All right, and then come back to hands and knees. You can shake out your hands actually if you'd like a little bit of break for your wrists. Anytime we're on our hands, you have the option to be up on fingertips or fists if you like, or even on forearms, and that'll take the wrists out of it. But the more that you practice being on your hands, the stronger the muscles will be that help protect your wrist, right? Especially if you spread the fingers wide. All right, we're gonna do a little bit of single knee balancing stuff. So if you'd like to bring some padding underneath your right knee, let's say, then go ahead and do that. We always start with the opposite side, so let's change it up a little bit, right? Again, messing with the neuromuscular patterns in our bodies. So from here, step your left leg back behind you. And then get all of these activations going. Press the floor away from you, hug the upper arm bones toward each other, draw your belly button to your spine. And then I want you to look back and lift your leg just enough that you can still see your toes, right? You're not lifting up too high. You're certainly not dumping into the low back. Okay, so lifting up just a little bit. And then maintain that length through the spine. Squeeze the bum, lift the leg as much as you can before you have to compensate into the low back. And then lower it down, maybe to the earth or maybe you hover. So a few more of these. And it doesn't have to be crazy high. Keep drawing your belly button to your spine. What we're doing is just warming up the extensors here of the hip. So particularly, you're probably feeling your hamstrings and your glutes, right? But try not to have that movement come into the low back. All right, and then rest, shake it out a little bit. Staying on that same side, let's start to take big circles or shapes here. And now let it move however you need to move. You can keep the knee bent. You could draw figure eights. Right, just loosening up that hip. Also firing up the stabilizers on the bottom leg, you might notice. All right, and then come down to hands and knees. Shake it out a little bit. And then we'll switch sides. So if you're using padding, bring it underneath your left knee now. Hands or fingers spread nice and wide, hands out or shoulder width apart or wider, and then step your right leg back. And again, take this moment to set your position up. Look back, really squeeze the top of the thigh on that back leg, and then maybe de-weight the toes. Press the lower ribs up to the sky, And then lift the right leg. Again, not so much that you dump into the low back, right? So it's not going to be a huge range of motion, particularly as we're also working on a balance here. You could play with reaching your heel back away from you or pointing the toes. For me, I feel like I get more strength reaching the heel back. Not entirely sure why. Last couple here. All right, shake it out, a little wiggle. And then we'll do those big hip circles with the right knee bent. So pick it up to the side, right? I say big. They can be as small as big or as big as you need to, but make sure that you go every direction, every which way. All right, come back to hands and knees. Shake it all out. Our little cat and cow. You could stay here if you'd like to, moving and grooving. You might choose to rest in child's pose for a few breaths. Maybe you choose to take downward facing dog. So wherever you need to go for about 5 breaths. I'm going to take downward facing dog just because my calves feel tight. So I'm going to use these few breaths to help loosen my lower leg. One more inhale. One sweet exhale. All right. If you're in child's pose, all you have to do is slither forward onto your belly. Same thing if you're in hands and knees or downward facing dog. Ripple forward into your plank first, and then exhale. Come all the way down to the earth. So a little bit more work. Little wiggle of the hips from side to side. Once you get there, untuck your toes. Press the tops of your feet into the floor, so much so you feel your kneecaps lift away. Send your tailbone to the back wall. Feel your belly button engaged toward your spine, shoulder blades on your back. Inhale, lift the heart forward and up. Okay, so here we go. Spinal extension, right? Rather than extension at the hip. Admittedly, some of you, depending on how far you're pressing up, are going to be getting extension at the hip as well. But I'd like you to try to kind of isolate it to the spine. Keep pressing the tops of the feet into the floor. Hands could hover for a little bit more work. You could take them off your mat, wherever you need to go. But keep pressing the tops of the feet into the floor. So the opposite activation for the legs than we were just doing. All right, and then exhale, come all the way down. Bring one cheek to the earth. Deep belly breaths to release through your back. And then come back to center. All right, here's where if you have a pillow or a towel or a chip foam block or something like that, I'd like you to now bring it underneath your hips. Right? It might be one hip at a time, in which case we're going to start with the left hip. If you have a bolster, you could just bring it totally underneath your hips, right? If it's wide enough for you. I'm just going to isolate onto my left hip. So find a place that's relatively comfortable. It's going to feel a little bit weird, particularly if you have just one hip lifted up. And then I want you to bring your hands stacked in front of you and really press your forehead into your hands. So we're getting work here through the neck and the spine. Now, let's start with the left leg or whatever hip you have propped up. From here, I want you to think of squeezing the bum to lift that leg up. Keep the back long, lift as high as you can, and then exhale, lower down. So a few of these, keep pressing your forehead into the earth the whole time. Keep drawing your belly button into your spine the whole time. And that'll help prevent dumping into the lumbar spine. You might choose to point the toes away from you. You might choose to flex the foot and reach the heel back. Whatever feels better on your body. It's hard for me to keep all the activations going while I'm talking, so last couple I won't talk. Last one here. And then release down. Shake it out a little bit. If you have prop under just one hip, move it out to the side. And then pause and center for a couple breaths. Just see what you see, notice what you feel. And then let's switch sides. So if you're using a prop on just one side, bring it underneath your right hip bone. Now, right again, it feels a little bit weird, a little bit lopsided. And if your hands are stacked underneath your forehead, switch which hand is on top. Not a big difference, but it is a difference. All right. And then press your forehead into your hands. Get really active through the left side of the body for stability. And then think of reaching your tailbone back towards your feet. So belly button to spine. And then lift the left leg, or sorry, the right leg up. All right, trying to maintain length in your spine the entire time so that this movement is really isolated at the hip. You might be lifting up way higher than I am. You might not be lifting up as high. It doesn't matter. Again, you could play with reaching the heel away or pointing the toes away. Last few here. Keep pressing your forehead into your hands. All right, and then release. Remove all the props out from underneath of you. Bring one cheek to the floor. Take deep belly breaths to release through your lower back. And then come back to center and plant your hands, tuck your toes. Exhale, lift your hips all the way up and back into downward facing dog. If this doesn't work for your body today, then by all means, come to hands and knees. I totally forgot to give you the options if you weren't comfortable on your belly. I'm sorry. If you weren't comfortable on your belly, you can do it from hands and knees instead. But that's not super helpful after the fact, Emily. Bend your knees, look forward. Exhale, walk, step, or hop to the top edge of your mat into your standing forward fold. Fingertips to shins. Inhale, little part way lift. Exhale, fold. Couple more, just like that. Right, this is a mix of both extension at the hip and spinal extension. And then bend your knees, chin to chest, slowly roll up to standing, one vertebra at a time. And then come all the way up, little wiggle or shake out. Bring your hands to your hips, take a few hip circles one direction and then the other. All right, and a little twist. Because no matter how hard we try to keep it out of the spine, right, out of the lumbar spine, sometimes we still end up tweaking it a little bit. So, all right, bring your hands to your hips, a little buoyancy in the knees, send your weight to your right foot. And then here we go. Hip extension while standing. Now this gets a little bit tricky, right? As soon as we do this, we start to dump into the low back. So tailbone down, belly button to spine. Almost think of drawing your lower ribs to the top of the pelvis. Right? Maybe this is enough for you, just stepping the foot back and bring it forward. Maybe you lift it up a little bit. Maybe take a few pulses here. And it does not have to be crazy high, but you should be really feeling it into your butt and your hamstrings. Last one. And then shake it out. step to the other side. Get all the activations going, little buoyancy on the left knee, and then step the right foot back and see how it feels. Maybe it's better just to step it back on this side. Maybe it feels better to take a few pulses. Generally, one side you will have more mobility than the other, but not necessarily. It's also hard to tell how much mobility you have here, right? Because it's going behind you. You probably aren't in a room full of mirrors. If you are, you can use them to check out, right? They can be a useful tool. Last couple here. Really trying to keep the spine still. All right, step it down. Little wiggle or shake. Inhale, sweep your arms up to the sky. Exhale, melt to the earth. Forward fold. Inhale, little partway lift. Exhale, fold. Bend your knees, plant your hands, step back, hands and knees. Little wiggle or shake or cat and cow. And then shift your hips on one side. Swing your legs forward and roll down onto your back. You could do a Pilates style roll down, tucking the tailbone and really using your core to get you down. Or if you want more support, use your hands, right? Just make your way down onto your back. However works best for you today. And then once you're down, draw your knees into your chest, take a little rock from side to side. And I always like to end with a twist. So take your right arm out to the side, maybe shift your hips right a little bit to start with, and then exhale, lower your knees to the left. This could be as gentle or as deep as you need. Excuse me. Your knees could be stacked. You could take a single leg twist or legs crossed. But hopefully now, releasing through the entire spiral of the spine. Last couple of breaths here. And on your inhale, return to center, reset your pelvis and your spine. Maybe you shift your hips left a little bit, left arm goes out to the side. Exhale, lower your knees to the right. Again, as gentle or as deep of a twist as you need on this side. And as always, it never has to be the same twist from one side to the other. You can take a different variation. And even though it's the same spine that's rotating one way or the other, or twisting anyway, you might feel it in an entirely different spot along your torso or your pelvis even, depending on which side is being twisted, or rather which direction the twist is going. On your inhale, return to center, reset your pelvis and your spine, and draw your knees toward you. Take them wide out toward your shoulders or armpits. This feels particularly good sometimes for resetting the lumbar spine. Like for happy baby, you could stay here, you might kick your feet to the sky, you could grab the backs, the thighs, or somewhere along your legs, your ankles, or your feet. You could rock a little bit from side to side. And then if there's anything else you feel like you need before your rest, please feel free to take it. Otherwise, start to make your way into your final resting pose. It could be flat on your back, legs bent or straight in Shavasana. You could rest on your side or in child's pose or in a seated meditation. And there's no rush to get there. But once you have found your pose of rest, for 3 breaths, inhale through your nose. Exhale, sigh your breath away. 2 more. Let go of your breath control. Let go of any last muscle gripping or tension, particularly in your neck or your jaw. As each exhale, let your body melt a little bit deeper into the earth. And stay here longer if you can, 5 or 10 minutes. Thank you so much for joining me today. Namaste.